woman works alone overnight at the Swanson Motel, but before morning, she will be dead. And the discovery of a second victim will shatter this once quiet town, drawing national attention.
With no witnesses and limited evidence, it isn't long before the case goes cold.
But it isn't forgotten.
An officer assigned to the case hears about the FBI's new profiling unit and gets a psychological profile made of the killer.
As an emerging science, officers aren't sure at first how to use it. But 10 years later, Detective Rummel reads the profile and makes a discovery that will blow the case wide open.
It really takes its toll on a community. And for Dickinson, that's one crime that never went away. And for the police department, it never went away.
Though it takes over a decade for the suspect to finally emerge, the Swanson Motel murders will go on to become a textbook example used by the FBI in the training in their criminal profiling method.
The unsolved ones, we have to stand up
and approach these cases in a way outside the box.
Let the world know, is those out there that did commit a murder, there are people that are coming after you.
There's just a lot of good people trying to do the right thing.
Because it's something that you have to be passionate about.
Solve this, bring some peace to the family at least. Just doing my job.
The small town of Dickinson, North Dakota. A mere 50 miles from the Badlands, it's a place of rest for many transient workers employed in the region's booming oil sector.
It was an oil boom town, so there were a lot of people coming and going. Town was growing tremendously, so there was a lot of movement and a lot of transients.
In the early 80s, rooms at the Swanson Motel are typically rented on a weekly rather than a daily basis, given that so many of the oil workers are there for long periods of time. The motel is small and older and located on the main road in Dickinson. It's a staple of the growing community and an example of the economic boom many are benefiting from.
But something terrible is coming, something no one is prepared for, and something that's going to make national headlines.
At approximately 7:45 a.m. on November 16th, 1981, a man stops by the motel to grab a coffee and catch up with some of the staff like he always does before heading to work. The man is surprised that there's no one at the front desk.
He calls out several times. When no one answers, he makes his way around the desk, and he's horrified to see the body of a woman.
The man immediately calls 911 to report it. Patrolman Chuck Rummel arrives on the scene with Chief Barnhart and Detective Rice. Rummel, the rookie, secures the motel entrance, while investigators go over the crime scene inside.
Actually, I had just gotten back into patrol. I was in investigations for about 6 months, just about 2 weeks prior to that. And I decided investigations wasn't for me. Not at that time anyway. So I got back into uniform. And so I and my sergeant go screaming over there. And my job was to make sure nobody else gets into the crime scene.
As soon as the body is discovered, the clock is ticking. Investigators are working as hard as they can to find the person and make an arrest.
They went inside the building and examined the lady on the floor. She had her hands tied behind her back. She had her legs tied, and then the cord was wrapped around her neck. And as I'm outside, and those guys are in there processing that scene, a car comes up to a screaming halt, and this lady jumps out and said, "My baby, my baby."
The woman is Melody Leitz, the mother of 7-year-old Danelle, who investigators discover spent the night with her grandmother at the motel. Detectives have only started combing the scene when they discover a second body. Melody's daughter Danelle is found on a bed in a room used by employees working overnight shifts at the motel. She's covered with a sheet and she too has suffered head wounds and appears to have been smothered.
You didn't talk about your feelings back then. You didn't talk about how messed up this is. You just acted like a robot. We really talked about the case, but not about how we felt about the case or the fact that an innocent little girl was murdered.
Officers have the unfortunate task of breaking the news to the child's mother, who's here to pick her daughter up for school.
And I had to hold her back, and I couldn't hold her back. To be honest, she was going to go in there.
This is the first double homicide Dickinson has ever had, and police are feeling the immense pressure knowing a child is involved. The town is going to want answers. They're going to want them fast.
In the 60s, this once quiet town experiences an oil boom. But by the early 70s, then Governor Art Link predicts it's coming to an end. Only Governor Link's prediction is wrong. By 1981, the boom is still going strong, and the town of Dickinson sees a population increase of 7,000 people within a few years. With the new wells comes new economic opportunities, which attract many to the region. One result of this population increase, though, is an increase in crime.
Well, transients, especially these, would be able to make a lot of money pretty quickly. Along with the transients came the drugs and came a lot of other bad things, thefts, burglaries. Those guys don't live there permanently, so they really don't care about the community.
For Melody Leitz and her mom Priscilla Dinkle, the economic boom happening in Dickinson is tempting enough to uproot their lives for her. And in the summer of 1981, they make the 360-mile move from Crystal, North Dakota, where they lived most of their lives, to Dickinson. Melody moves with her daughter Danelle for work, and Priscilla finds a job managing the Swanson Motel. They all see this as a great opportunity and are happy with their new chosen home.
A town like Dickinson is the last place they would have expected any trouble. There's no way they would have known what was awaiting them there.
The female victim is identified as Priscilla Dinkle, 53 years old. In one tragic blow, Melody has lost both her mother and her daughter.
In spite of her grief, it's imperative for detectives to interview Melody. If anyone had a reason to kill her mother and her child, she would be the one to know it, and why. And after she takes a moment to collect herself, she comes up with a name: William Thomas Reager.
The day after the murders, police arrest Reager for drunk driving and a suspended license. Investigators review the crime scene evidence to try and paint a clearer picture of what may have happened.
Priscilla is struck in the head and tied up with an electrical cord.
The most disturbing thing investigators find is that it appears that 7-year-old Danelle has been sexually assaulted. However, this will need to be confirmed at the autopsy.
Priscilla does not appear to be sexually assaulted.
The big question here is motive. Did the killer know the victims? Did he know Danelle would be here? Was it strictly a sex crime? Was it a crime of opportunity? Was it financially motivated?
How do you narrow the field of suspects down in a case like this with all the strange people in and out of town?
Detectives explore the theory of a robbery gone wrong. Motel staff confirm $100 is missing from the cash box.
Investigators question William Reager, the man Melody accuses of killing her mother and child.
He got a DUI the night after, and he went up there and interviewed him right then about some things, some inconsistencies that he had found in the case or in his previous statement.
Police are hopeful that he's their man and that they can wrap up this investigation quickly. But beyond Melody's hunch that he's responsible for the murders, there's really no evidence linking him to the Swanson Motel murders.
With little else to hold William Reager for, he is released, and the Dickinson police continue to search for the killer. On the morning of November 16, 1981, 2 bodies are found at the Swanson Motel in Dickinson, North Dakota. The double homicide of Melody Leetz's mother and daughter shocks the town and makes national news.
Investigators respond with a long list of possible suspects. But Melody is convinced that it's a man named William Reager that's responsible for the murders.
Reager is interrogated, and detectives determine they have nothing to hold him on. He's released, and the search continues for the killer. An autopsy confirms what investigators already suspect.
Priscilla has a fractured skull, and Donnell has suffered a bruised skull. The mark on Donnell's cheek appears to be from a stick from the table that supports one of the leaves. The killer raped her, untied her, and then bludgeoned her on the head. The coroner puts their time of death sometime between 11 p.m. on November 15th and 3 a.m. on November 16th. The cause of death for both victims is strangulation with an electrical cord.
Investigators note that all the weapons used in the murder could be found in the motel room.
Nothing was brought to the scene to suggest this was premeditated, meaning this was likely a crime of opportunity. Though given the meager amount of cash that was taken, it's hard to believe that the motive for the sexual assault and murder was robbery.
So where do you start? You know, the investigators started with the people that were living in the motel, and they were talking with them.
Investigators interview motel guests to see if anyone saw or heard anything suspicious.
Only one guest, a man in a room near where the young girl was murdered, remembers hearing anything unusual. He described hearing a sound like a cat meowing.
Just as the investigation appears to be hitting a wall, Chief Bernhardt gets a report that a witness recalls seeing a mysterious individual the night of the murder.
One of the suspects we began to look at immediately was somebody that had a backpack on and was traveling through town.
The description is vague, but the witness claims he may have been armed.
Turns out to be a flimsy lead, but investigators will take whatever they can get. So they start looking for a man who fits the witness description.
In the meantime, this double homicide in the quiet small town has acquired a lot of notoriety and the attention of the entire nation.
On November 17, 1981, Chief Barnhart addresses the press and tells them no single suspect has been identified, but they're combing through a list of potential suspects.
2 people are dead, and the killer is still at large. People don't know if he's passing through town and is long gone, or if it's one of their own neighbors, someone still among them. It causes a lot of fear and anxiety.
To have this type of crime happen, particularly involving a child, that threw everybody into a buzz. People got scared. People started locking doors, started calling things in that were suspicious. They took notice and were, being very conscientious of their surroundings.
Priscilla and Donnell may not have been residents of Dickinson very long, but given their involvement at the motel, they're now known by many in the community. Priscilla Dinkle is born on January 5th, 1928, and marries Frank Dinkle.
Investigators interview immediate and extended family. It becomes clear that no one close to them could be a suspect. The search for the killer widens.
One particular piece of evidence that investigators are hoping to get is a fingerprint found on the door jamb from the door behind the front desk.
They actually cut the frame and preserved the fingerprint.
The entire motel staff is fingerprinted for elimination prints. Many of the prints found in the crime scene belong to staff or those permitted access to the area.
But the print from the door jamb doesn't belong to any of the staff. It belongs to someone else. Perhaps the killer leaves it when he places his hand on the door to the back where the child is sleeping. By December, investigators still have not named a single suspect. The case has heavy national attention due to the graphic nature of the murders.
Chief Barnhart announces that the State Crime Lab in Bismarck, North Dakota, is evaluating all the fingerprints and other evidence obtained from the crime scene. But it's important to remember that DNA testing in the early 80s is an emerging science, and it is not readily available or used in police departments. The fingerprint evidence and the possibility of an eyewitness is their best chance of narrowing in on a suspect.
Investigators finally catch up with the man they believe a witness saw the night of the murder on Highway 22, the mystery suspect.
We actually did find that person in another state like about a week later. And investigators talked with him, but he had nothing to do with it. He wasn't even near that area.
Anytime an investigator is assigned to the detectives division, they are assigned to the Swanson murder case in the hope that a fresh set of eyes will bring some new perspective to the case.
In February 1982, Detective Jackie Martin is assigned to the case.
She's heard about the FBI's new profiling unit and contacts them in the hopes that they will develop a psychological profile of the killer. But the technique is still new, and detectives don't know how to read it properly. More suspects need to be interviewed. Meanwhile, Detective Jim Rice continues to send evidence to police departments and labs across the country in the hopes that they'll get a hit on their databases.
Then, in November 1983, police think they may have finally caught a break. A man is arrested in Texas and confesses to over 100 murders across the United States.
But when questioned about Priscilla and Danelle's killings, he said he had no involvement.
There were a couple serial killers that were brought up on that. Trouble was, they were in the area. They were taken care of pretty quickly. I mean, as far as they couldn't have done it. You feel defeated. You feel like, what did I miss? It haunts you. That's the cases that haunt you. You go to bed and you go, what could I have done different?
The case goes cold and gets shelved for now. Following the double homicide of Priscilla Dinkle and Danelle Lates, detectives canvass motel guests, but no one remembers seeing or hearing anything suspicious. A fingerprint is lifted from the scene, but there are no hits in the system that is trying to match the print. The FBI's head of the new Criminal Profile Division agrees to help with the case and creates a criminal profile for the killer. And when a serial killer is caught in Texas, who claims responsibility for over 100 murders nationwide, Dickinson detectives are hopeful that they've finally caught their man. But the serial killer denies having anything to do with the Swanson motel murders. The case goes cold and gets shelved. It's now March 1987, and while the case has gone cold, it remains open, with investigators following any new leads they can afford the time on. The once quiet town of Dickinson has not forgotten the brutal killings, nor have they forgotten that somewhere out there, a killer still walks free. Possibly even someone they know in their own community. In February 1989, Paul Bozzano becomes the new Dickinson police chief.
In July 1990, due to the high-profile nature of the Swanson motel murders, the police commissioner tasks Chief Bazzano with solving them. The public is hopeful that with a new chief, the killer might finally be brought to justice. They assume that although some money was missing from the crime scene, robbery wasn't the motive. Because there are no signs of forced entry into the motel and no evidence suggesting that the victims sought help, investigators conclude that the suspect knew his victims.
Bazzano assigns the original responding patrolman, now detective, Chuck Rummel, to head this case.
The chief wants Detective Rummel to study the case intimately, more than anyone has before.
So every investigator kind of looks at it differently. And so with me, I started from the very beginning. I said, okay, I'm going to start from ground zero, which means I start from those people that lived in that hotel again. I'm going to start with them again. And I'm going to process each one more thoroughly, I hope.
Detective Rummel can barely get the 3-foot by 4-foot cabinet drawer open because the paperwork is spilling out. He has his fair share of work cut out for him.
The Swanson motel has been torn down, so Rummel relies on crime scene photographs. He has a thick file of over 90 suspects, which includes serial killers from across the country. He decides to start from ground zero. He reads everything in the case file.
Detective Rummel is a few months into the case when he's sitting at his kitchen table reviewing Douglas's FBI profile of the killer.
So I read it. I read the profile, and I reread it, and I reread it, and just said, okay, which suspect does this fit? And I eliminated right off the bat about all down to 10. So I went from 90 to 10. And I continued to study it and look through the files, and I got down to 2. Bill Reager was one of them.
From a list of over 90 suspects, the FBI profile appears to fit William Reager, the man Melody first accuses of killing her mother and daughter.
Rummel tracks down Reager's wife and questions her on his appearance.
He knows from the profile that the killer would have changed his looks after the murders.
So I asked his wife, did Bill change his appearance in any way? And she said, yeah. Immediately, she said, his hair was always jet black. And when I saw him a couple weeks after this thing happened, his hair was gray, just gray.
She also states that he stayed around Dickinson for about a month after the murders. This, along with other matching pieces from the FBI profile, encourages Rummel that he's on the right track.
I already had 4 items on that profile that were accurate. Now I got to dig deeper, and so I continue to dig into the profile.
William Reager is born in the town of Beach, North Dakota, in 1942. He and his family moved to Bismarck in 1948. Reager experiences a tumultuous upbringing. He begins elementary school the year before his family moves, and is known for often getting into fights on the playground. In one incident, some of the kids tie a rope around his waist and hoist him to the top of the flagpole. Reager only finishes to grade 11, and soon after, he joins the military. While he's stationed in Germany on January 18, 1964, his mother is killed by a drunk driver. William flies home for her funeral. After the Army, William moves to Dickinson and lives there for several years. In 1970, he's sentenced to a year at the state penitentiary on a burglary charge. While in jail, his wife at the time divorces him. After his release in March 1971, he returns to Dickinson. He makes his living driving a cab and working for the city. Though Dickinson police know of him, he avoids trouble with the law during this time.
At the time of the 1981 murders, he is still driving a cab. He's also living at the Swanson Motel.
As I started looking at the other suspect, I had two of them. I kind of eliminated him. He didn't fit some of the profile like Bill was fitting. And so I decided, let's stick with Bill. And let's find Bill and let's talk to Bill.
Rummel has the records department track down Reager using the FBI's National Crime Information Center.
Anytime someone comes up in the system, it gets recorded. And since Reager has a criminal record, he's in the system.
Which is how Rummel discovers that a trooper in Arkansas stops Reager and runs the FBI's NCIC.
Rummel learns that Reager is now living in Batesville, Arkansas. And not only that, he's suspected for a homicide there as well.
A decade after the murders, Rummel and Detective Jerry Thiessen drive down to Arkansas to coordinate with police there and question Reager. On the way, Rummel tells his partner that he has no plans on returning until they find out, one way or another, if Reager is responsible for the Swanson Motel murders. The hunt for the truth is on. Roughly 8 years after the double homicide, the new Dickinson police chief, Paul Bazzano, reopens the case. Chuck Rummel, one of the first responding officers on the scene of the murder day, is assigned the case and asked to go over every detail. He spends hours poring over files and reports, but when he comes across the FBI's criminal profile, he suddenly has a revelation of who the killer is. Rummel believes the man Melody Leitz suspected back in 1981 fits the profile: William Reager. Rummel tracks Reager down and discovers he's living in a small town in Arkansas. With the cooperation of local police, he may have a chance to finally interview his primary suspect. Rummel's plan is to coordinate with local police and arrest Reager on a polygamy warrant.
Reager has two wives. The one that Rummel spoke to on the phone, who was with him after Dickinson, and a more recent second wife down in Arkansas. As the two detectives cross state lines, they discuss theories of how Reager may have committed the murders.
The detectives speculate that because Reager is living at the motel, Priscilla is used to seeing him come and go, and would have thought nothing of him being there that late at night.
Since there are no indications that there was a struggle, he could have gotten close enough to strike her, which is something a stranger likely couldn't have done.
Once Reager incapacitates Priscilla, he moves on to the sleeping child in the back of the bedroom. And after he's done the unthinkable, he returns to Priscilla to finish her off and make sure there are no witnesses. The day after detectives Rummel and Thiessen arrive, sheriffs in a small, nearby Arkansas town pick Reager up and hold him in their office, under arrest for polygamy. The night that the Dickinson detectives arrive, their Arkansas hosts catch them up to speed on the local murder Reager is suspected of.
In 1988, Della Harding is home alone when Reager allegedly breaks in and strangles her to death. He then puts her in the trunk of her own car, dumps her in a nearby creek, and then abandons the car nearby. Arkansas detectives learn that Reager drives by that house every day, going to and from work.
After comparing notes, the detectives see a similar profile emerging for these murders.
It's another elderly woman known to the killer. though in this case, there is no sexual assault motive.
Arkansas detectives allow Rummel to take a first crack at interviewing Reager. Rummel is nervous, but he thinks back to an earlier conversation he has with Judd Ray, the FBI profiler who's taken over the case from Douglas.
And he told me, he said, you know, when you interview Bill, take your time, just go over, you know, just don't push him. Don't push him. And he'll talk to you, but plan on like a couple days of interviewing. Interview him for a couple hours, then let go, you know, and that, take it real easy, because he wants to talk to you. And he really wants to, his conscience is really still will bother him about what he did to that little girl.
After years without a break in the case, detectives finally have the opportunity to interview a suspect. Rummel is convinced Reager is the killer, but he'll need to remember his training and Agent Ray's advice if he hopes to get a confession.
Reager's nervous, but seems cooperative. However, once Rummel brings up the Swanson motel murders, Reager denies having anything to do with them. Rummel knows that it may take time to break the suspect down. He does something he's never done before in an interview. He reveals the FBI profile to Reager.
I said, look at this, Bill. Look at what the FBI says about you. And what? You know, and so I went over it with him. And during the interview, I said, you know what's bothering you? Is the fact that you did what you did to that little girl. That's what's bothering you. Because the profile itself said he feels justified with what he did with Grandma, but not to the little girl. That's why he covered her up. I said, but Bill, we're gonna have to get this, you know, some closure here. You're gonna have to tell me what you did. And he looks down and he says, okay, you want me to tell you I did it? Holds up his hands, he says, I did it. Just like that, just says, I did it. I said, thank you, Bill. Now let's talk about the case. Let's talk about the details. And he told us everything. He just flat out confessed.
Reager tells detectives that on November 15th, 1981, he had dinner with Priscilla, Melody, and Danelle. Priscilla had cooked for a dozen people, many of whom were residents of the Swanson Motel.
Reager confesses he returned to the office later to talk to Priscilla about dating Melody. But when Priscilla refused to help him, he grew agitated and struck her. He says he was upset with Melody, and that's when he saw her daughter sleeping in the back room.
Reager is meticulous in the details of his account, noting what the victims were wearing, the weapons he used, including the piece of wood and the electrical cord, even recalling the missing items, like the picture of the victims and the platter hanging on the wall.
However, when it comes time to confess to the rape of a child, he clams up and doesn't want to talk. The FBI profile indicates that he is ashamed of the sexual assault. So this isn't a surprise to detectives, but they aren't happy with half a confession.
Because when I asked him what he did, he said, I sexually assaulted a little girl. That's as far as I could go. Where Jerry goes, you gotta tell us exactly what you did.
Finally, Reager breaks down and shamefully admits to raping a child. As the detectives rise to leave, Reager thanks them. In total, the confession has only taken 90 minutes to obtain.
So we're done with ours. I come out and I'm pretty pumped. You know, you can imagine we got them and it's on tape and all that kind of thing. So we go out and they asked me a couple questions and I said, if you've got things on him, he's ready to talk.
With Reager's taped confession, Dickinson detectives pass him on to Arkansas detectives for questioning.
The Arkansas detective employs a much different interview approach. Reager refuses to talk or offer any information. and the detective presses the conversation.
Nevertheless, Arkansas police let it leak that they have a serial killer in custody. Suddenly, departments all across the nation are calling, seeing if they can get Reager to fit the killer in their own cases.
Rummel is worried he'll lose the suspect, and it could be years before this case goes to trial. He calls Judd Ray at the FBI, hoping to ensure Reager is tried in North Dakota.
But with blood in the water, and departments all across the country wanting a piece of Reager, it's anyone's guess where and when the killer will be tried. Chuck Rummel is concerned that after all these years, he may not get to try Reager in North Dakota. But the FBI assures him that they want one solid conviction. And given Reager's willing confession of the Swanson motel murders, North Dakota seems the most likely place to try him. But the Arkansas DA isn't interested in giving Reager up so easily, and wants to try him in the state.
The Arkansas district attorney foolishly overplays his hand. He calls the defense attorney who takes Reager's case to give him a piece of his mind. But when he learns he's not home, he berates his wife for allowing her husband to defend a man like Reager. The defense attorney files a restraining order against the district attorney. The judge, set to hear the matter, calls this thing a fiasco, and then on September 3rd, 1991, rules that the murder charges against Reager have to be dropped.
It was not pretty, but eventually we were able to get him back up to North Dakota. The governor, Bill Clinton at the time, signed extradition.
Rummel escorts his prisoner back to Dickinson, North Dakota, to be tried for murder. The community reaction to the news is shock and disbelief. Reager has lived among them for years. Priscilla's widower, Frank Dinkel, even knows him from their days of working on the oil rigs.
I mean, it hit the papers for a week, always something about Bill. It hit the Bismarck Tribune, it hit Grand Forks, Fargo, all over, It was a state celebration kind of thing.
Rummel interviews Melody to get a fuller picture of Reager's connection to the family. Melody shares that for years, she's written to her dead daughter, telling her how much she loves and misses her.
Melody describes to Rummel that she didn't like Reager from the moment she met him in October 1981. She knows that he's romantically interested in her, but she has no reciprocal feelings for him. She finds him strange and spooky. She recounts an incident that happened only days before the murder.
Melody gets a call on November 13th, 1981, that her daughter is at the motel and crying uncontrollably.
Donnell tells her mom that Reager was trying to play with her and another child. She points to her privates to show how they were playing. Melody confronts Reager, but nothing more comes of it at this time. Melody explains she immediately told police that she suspected Reager of committing the murders. However, police never detained Reager or strongly considered him as a suspect.
On February 4th, 1992, William Reager stands before a Southwest Judicial District Court judge and pleads not guilty on the advisement of his attorney.
And that's why we made this big cardboard of 10 to 12 items that he still remembered, including the clothing they wore and the fact that, he tied them up with vacuum cleaner cords, that kind of thing. I mean, he remembered all that. And a lot of that wasn't even ever, broadcast.
Unfortunately, the fingerprint that they pulled from the door jamb does not match Reager's. Additionally, the DNA samples collected in 1981 are not usable.
The DNA evidence was ruined when a freezer went out years before at the state crime lab where the evidence was stored. So I had nothing to go on. I had the sticks that were used. I had the clothes that the victims were wearing. I had those kind of things, but I had no evidence that could link him to it.
On June 9th, 1992, 1 week before Reager's trial is set to begin, Detective Rummel gets an urgent call telling him to come to the prison where Reager is being held. When Rummel arrives, he learns that Reager has passed away in the night while sleeping. But Detective Rummel has no lingering doubts about Reager's guilt and the confession he willingly provided.
Reager gives details about the crime scene that only the killer would know. Everything he confesses to, including his motive of jealousy and his interest in Melody, aligns with the facts of the case.
The physical evidence and Reager's knowledge of it instills confidence in Rummel that he is the right man. But it's really the FBI profile that's the piece that finishes the puzzle.
After the murders, Reager changes his appearance and moves around frequently. He eventually kills again, just like the profile predicted he would. In Rummel's mind, there is no lingering doubt. William Reager is guilty of killing Priscilla Dinkle and her granddaughter Danelle. Reager isn't caught due to physical evidence like DNA, fingerprints, or eyewitness testimony. Instead, he's caught by the new method of FBI criminal profiling. This is one of the first instances in the United States where this method was used to solve a case that had gone completely cold.
If nothing else, to give some families of victims some hope. There are still police departments out there that care, and there are cops out there and investigators that pursue these things till the end. To let them know that it could break and to give them some hope, you know? And to make sure that those criminals are always looking over their shoulders. We might be there to get you next. That's important. So, you didn't get away with it.
To this day, we don't know how many murders Reager is responsible for, whether the Swanson motel killings were his first, and whether the Arkansas killing was his last. What we do know is that justice finally caught up to him.